So, welcome to Graphical Approaches to Get Unstuck and Facilitate Insight session. I
Oh,
will let Curie and Steve introduce themselves and introduce their book and what the session will cover today. Thank you both.
so thank you so much for having us. Thank you for hosting, and it's a real privilege to be here. I will shut up very quickly. I'll hand over to Curie because to introduce what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. But some of you know me already. I'm Steve, and as Yelena said, I've been knocking around for quite a long time as a coach, as a facilitator, and as a developer. I've never met Curie. We've never. Oh, we met once, haven't we? We've had one. We've met once in all the years we've worked together. Everything has been done online. And Kira and I have different sort of styles of doing things, but we came together based around this idea of we both kind of draw pictures with the clients and the people that we work with. Kira, do you want to tell them about you, and then we'll pick up where we're going to go and what we're going to do.
Lovely. My name's Curie Scott. I am currently at Southampton University, but I'm based in Bournemouth, which is cloudy, but supposed to be sunny. So that is contextual information. And I've been doing drawing for a while, but without realizing that I've been doing drawing. So I taught health professional students, so higher education, and I used a lot of drawing, and people started asking me about it. So I started coaching, but didn't realize I was coaching. I then did a PhD in drawing as a way of thinking about deep topics or taboo topics on the topic of aging. So it was related. That was my connection with health. And then the drawing has taken off. So that's been really exciting. And so I do that independently. Steve and I met at a network meeting, and it literally went something like, Steve, in this meeting, my first time, said, I just shared that I'd finished the first book. And he said, looks very interesting. I've just got it. And can we chat? Because I do drawing. And I don't know that I'm really excited that we're here. So we had that conversation saying, well, what books do you read? And we realized we've just developed this as we've gone along. And so that's how a book started. So just to encourage you, if you think I've got a book in me, it can just start like that. So we've put in details. Yelena will pop in details. If you would like to take any screen, it is recorded, but if you want to take any screen grabs, feel free to. The chat will be going, and one of us will be monitoring it as we tag team. If there's anything we've missed at the end, please do, highlight that again or bump it up. So that's some background. We'll put in LinkedIn. My LinkedIn address is the word I want if you want to post or connect afterwards. So we will move on to how we are doing this. So before we do, another prompt that you just need some paper and basic pens. You don't need anything clever. You just grab that. More and more faces I know, so that's really exciting. So over to Steve.
Fantastic. Oh, I can just see my LinkedIn profile has been posted. I haven't used my LinkedIn for about 15 years, so it will be a very youthful Steve with not a lot of experience in my LinkedIn. I gave up on LinkedIn a long time ago for the same reason that I don't do social media and that I value my time and my mental health. But anyway, I just don't do it. But it's there, I guess, somewhere in the ether. Anyway, just in the chat bar, folks, could you tell us what your job is, what your day job is? What's actually your role? Because I mean, maybe you are a coach, but what actually are you employed by your organization to do? Or what do you, when somebody says to you, what do you do? Just in the chat bar, tell us what you do, because there's going to be a little bit of fantastic, Emma, superb, a lecturer, student development coach, superb, Ellen, educational developer, decolonization research, head of coaching, chartered coaching, Christ, student development. This is a test in my ability to read quickly, but what I'm seeing is that there are lots of different roles here: researcher, developer, working with postdocs, research culture, mentoring. Tim, visual facilitator, superb, excellent. Right, okay, probably you're more of an expert on it than we are. Finance professor, excellent. Right, so lots of different roles. The reason that we're asking that question is that whether you are a coach or a trainer or a facilitator, manager, teacher, supervisor, lecturer, whatever it is that you do, the things that Curie and I are hopefully going to help you with here a little bit can be applied to all of them in some way. And what I realized was that I started out working with with bigger groups and drawing pictures on walls for them, and then realized that the approach that I was using could be used on a one-to-one basis, and I brought it into my coaching practice. So what we're going to cover with you in the time that we have, first of all, why use this sort of approach? And we were, Curie and I were talking this morning, and we kind of, although it's been implicit in our work for a long time, one of us, might have been me, used the word vision. We try and get people to have a vision. And so a lot of the work that we do is quite graphical, even if it's not drawing with pens and paper. So why use a graphical approach? What we want to do really is just show you, how to amplify its effectiveness. Because, I suspect that many of you will have, drawn a doodle for a colleague at some point and said, look, it works a little bit like this. Or if you've run a training course, you put a model up on a slide, but how to amplify the effectiveness of that. And then also, what are the tricks and tools, and just give you a taster of some of the things that we do. The other thing is that Curie and I come at this from different angles. I'm a bioscientist originally, whereas Curie's already explained, how she got into it. But we have different ways of doing things. Mine is it's much more pens and paper, whereas Curie will use mixed methods, left, right, and centre, all over the place with things. I would suggest that Curie is far more creative than I am. But we just thought we could start by saying, why do we use it, and why did we write the book? And so Curie's already sort of mentioned a little bit about this, but for me, I realized that, it was a good way of getting people to create a metaphor, to unstick something by saying, look, it works like this, and my role is that, but their role is that, and so my coaching practice was then, well, how might you amplify the effectiveness of that relationship? Where do you need to declutter that communication channel? And it helped if I was sitting someone to have pens and paper in front of me to do that. And I found that they were naturally picking up the pen and kind of helping me to understand by drawing me little pictures too. What about you, Curie? How did you? Because the origami is yours, whereas the other ones are mine.
Yeah. The origami was a specific workshop, so it's there, but some of you might be like, I can't do this. So let me give you an example. I ran something with Alison James, which was for the Plays Festival at Winchester, and that was very much about mindful making. So we made different elements, thinking about what we bring, what we love about our work, and each piece didn't look like anything. And then I got them to connect them all together and got a lotus that floated. So it was almost a coming together of people and thought as a metaphor. Where I came with it is, so I trained as a medical doctor. So we've both got sciencey backgrounds. And a lot of metaphors are there in medicine. So if I was talking about heart failure and talking about the blood flow, and people don't get it because it is, it's because you can't feel it, can't see it, you don't know it. And I'd say, well, tell me about your journey in the car today. And then we talked about motorways, and we talked about what happens when there's a blocked road. You might bypass. What could you do? And we'd what happens when there's congestion. So that's an example of what Steve is saying, that suddenly we're using a metaphor to explain something, that a concept, and people suddenly get it. And that was probably the beginning of just getting people to draw. There's a lot of drawing in medicine as well. So that was my background. Separately, I do art stuff, and slowly over time, it's come together. The other thing that I would say about it is that we just use what materials we have on hand as well. So sometimes you'd be like, oh my goodness, in this context, I could really use this space or these objects that are here. And the last thing is that it makes it fun, especially if you are running the same session over and over again. People spark and come alive. And just that moment for me as an educator, where people go, oh, I get it. I'm like, oh, I love those aha moments. I get way more of them doing things like this.
And for me, when I'm coaching on a one-to-one basis, having a visual touchstone that you can come back to again and again and saying, do you remember that picture that you drew, or those words that you typed into ChatGPT and created an image of how you wanted your future to look? And we can use that again and again and again. We can keep coming back to it and say, you're getting closer to this thing, or, what are the blocks, as Curie is saying, on the way there. Just in the chat, folks, how do you currently use visuals? How do you currently use it? And if you don't use it at all, and Curie and I are talking Martian at you, just type a question mark, because then we're not waiting for something that's not going to come. But how do you use visuals in your practice? What sort of things do you do? What's your anything? And anything is interesting at this point to us. And if you don't do anything at all, that's fine too. We're just kind of curious to know.
I
So
will add on that some of these visuals may be actual objects. So you might say, well, we use these in the labs. You are using visuals.
Yeah.
Here are your microscope slides. Here's some examples of the different cell types we have. Have a look. That's using a visual, but practically.
Yeah. So Rona's saying mind mapping, Emma's saying metaphors, visualing rather than drawing them or making them. Almost nothing. Mind maps to organize thoughts. Fantastic, Sarah. That's good. Metaphors. There we go. Superb, Marjorie. Teaching visuals and graphs and diagrams. Superb. So, if you do any kind of slideshow work, you're probably at some point going to be showing people diagrams and pictures. And that maybe you can scale that up. You can scale that down to individuals as well. Tend to use it to encourage people to explore. What else have we got? Personality and intersectional identities. Right, so okay, you like this, you like that. Fantastic, good stuff. Lisa, imagery, mostly on slides for workshops, PowerPoint images. There we go. Shared exploration through visual development, mind mapping. Superb. Oh, how people feel with Lego. Absolutely, there, Kate. There's some pictures of Lego coming up later on. Images, one-to-one coaching. Oh, fantastic.
There was an unusual one, the jelly baby tree. So we might have Yelena tell us about that.
I sometimes still use the jelly baby tree. I can tell you what it is. You're not supposed to call it the jelly baby tree anymore. You've got to call it the blob tree, because jelly babies had a bit of a strop about it. But basically, it's a load of kind of jelly baby sort of blobs sitting on a tree. And you say, well, I'm the one on the solid branch, or I'm the one on the swing, or, it's a way of creating a metaphor about somebody's position in a hierarchical or in their organization. So the jelly baby tree is still there. Superb, Ruth. Love using images. Great stuff. Or magic box. Yeah. So objects in coaching. So there's lots of things. Stress buckets. There's all sorts of things. And again, you can Google these and go and have a look at them. But there's all sorts of bits together. Kate using cartoons. Right. So bottom line is we all use these things in all sorts of different creative ways. Even if you are not necessarily, hugely creative, you've probably at some point done something with a pre-existing scaffold, like a coaching wheel. Imagine a pizza, and how far are those slices full towards where you want them to be. You might have, you might have done something like that. You might have used some sort of pre-existing circles of concern or circles of influence, or what is absolutely required and nice and necessary and cut. You might have used existing models and scaffolds, and you might have done it with individuals, or you might have done it with groups and had them sit around and draw on the same framework. But regardless of what you do, there's a definite advantage for us, whether it be a one-to-one or a one-to-group relationship, of having people kinesthetically involved in the material. Because as you'll know, people, regardless of what you think about learning theory, we know that people learn in different ways and people engage in different ways. And so sometimes people are very able to work in headspace, and sometimes actually having something on the table where they can say, no, in my world, it's like this, is an advantage to different people in different ways. So what that means is, and Curie, you'll have something to say about this, is that, we spend a lot of time with folk trying to debunk the notion of you don't need to be hugely talented with a pen to facilitate a coaching conversation or a group conversation using a graphical method. So one of the things that I get asked a lot is, how do you do those big murals that you draw? And I draw these big murals that fill a wall. And actually, it's quite easy as long as you can draw stick men and plan how you want it to look. It's not a difficult thing to do. But I know, Curie, it's a conversation you have with people a lot about this, this idea of, but I'm not creative and I can't draw.
So I think, and I would say, I couldn't do what Steve does. It takes practice. It takes a way of doing things, a method, which actually Steve has written up. But whereas because I've got the drawing and I've got the art side, people always will say, well, I can't do art, because they imagine I do something like I'm doing there. And this was about reducing control. So reducing control on the marks that you make. So yes, I can do that. I will bring my skills into it. Steve will bring his skills into it. And in that same way, please bring your skills into it. You might have it does take a little bit of risk. You might have a go with Lego and go, this isn't me at all. I can't make it work. I can't engage people. This is not good for my client group. So we would say start small, just do it for a small project, or do it with somebody else, try the examples in the book, talk to other people that do things, feel free to connect with each other. But it is not producing a vast map of a big conference like the image with Steve, and it is not being artistic in a studio like Curie. It is whatever you want it to be, but the key thing is that it makes it moves conversations forward, and for us in this context, helps people get unstuck quicker. And so that's what we're going to show you. I'm going to go to like, what do we need? So even on these images, you can see that there's lots of tools that I would need in a studio, or that would be there. But literally you need what is in your bag probably. You've got some paper, you've got some pens, you've probably got some Post-its. They are bog standard facilitation things. If you use a sort of grab bag of objects, gather a grab bag that you can grab and take with you. So the objects on the bottom left of the slide that you see, this is a tool that I use, and it's with objects. I basically have a bag with all sorts of nonsense in them, nothing precious, so they can't get stolen, and I get upset. So you can see there's a glasses case, there's a pack of cards, there's a Pritt stick, there's a sponge, random things. But I will use this as in certain groups to say, right, to get to know each other. Pop your hand in, grab an item. There's nothing sharp and nothing scary. There's no live animals. I've had to say that in there. And I just want you to use that and tell us something about you that you're happy to share. So, and people start, and it's just to get them started talking. So that's another power dynamic of visuals. There will be people who English is not their first language. It is really, really tense speaking. But if they pick up a sponge and say, oh, I used to use these plastic sponges and I've now converted to eco-friendly ones, they've said something. They've heard their own voice. Other people nod, because it's really, it's low risk. Now, nobody has to do it. If they pick something and they go, oh, I can't think of anything, pick something else. That's absolutely fine. So that's a particular visual tool that I might use.
And you can then scale that. So that'll work with a group, but it'll also work with an individual as well. The other place is that, and you will all recognize this, that a lot of the work that we do is not necessarily in a live room anymore. It's a conversation held through your telly on Zoom or Teams. And so to think, well, okay, how could you do that quickly with a group? And I'll illustrate. Just have a look at the screen in front of you. Have a look at the objects on the screen. Apologies for the slight watermarking behind it, but I've downloaded this. I've lifted it off the internet because I was not going to stitch together 300 objects. But I will typically use something like this, just as a conversation starter. Just have a look at it. And what I'd like you to do, or what we'd like you to do, is just pick a couple of objects off it that in some way describe or reflect your approach to your developmental role, whether it be that you're a professor of culture shift and coaching, or that you're a researcher developer, whatever your developmental role is. Just pick a couple of objects from the smorgasbord in front of you that describe and or reflect your approach to how you go about doing your job and what it means to you. And then, exactly, Emma, there you go. That's exactly it. Yeah, go and have a look around your flat and see what you've got. But this is a much quicker way of doing it, where you retain control much more quickly. Just in the chat, folks, just whack a couple of objects and type the names of those objects into the chat bar. If you could do that, that would be great. And then I'm going to put one or two of you on the spot just for a moment, get you to talk about it. So just pick a couple of things that symbolize or describe, reflect your role to the way you go about doing your developmental job. Perfect, Rob. Thank you very much. Lovely, Emma. Superb. Good stuff. We'll wait for other people. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Excellent. There we go. Oh, Elena, Ken. Good use of that word. the pretty pink flower, fantastic, good stuff. Oh, cassette tapes, flower and key. Right. Oh, now I'm curious. Right, I'm not going to ask everybody. We haven't got time. We haven't got time, even if we stayed here all day. But let's just find out a couple of things. I'm going to get a couple of you to talk, and I'm going to go with people that I don't know. And if I do know you and I've just accidentally forgotten your name, just apologies for the minute. But let's go with Alison Monkhouse. Are you able to talk to us? I know that you're going to be on record forever talking here, but Alison, are you able to talk to us?
Hello, yes,
Hello,
I
hello,
am
Alison.
happy to
Tell.
talk.
Oh, superb. Tell us a little bit about Heartkey Sunflower then. How just unpack for everybody how that is those are your visual touchstones for the way that you do your role.
Yes, I was drawn to the heart immediately. I don't know, there was just something there, and I think that just reflects the sort of, well, the heart is at the heart of my work, really. That care, that compassion, that that feels sort of really important for me. I chose the key, just thinking about just trying to unlock different perspectives, ways of thinking. And the sunflower was really about growth and encouraging people to sort of bloom and, yeah, reach for the sunlight, really. So yeah, they were the three that I chose.
Perfect. And if you had to just pick one that was the priority, the real touchstone of your ethos in the way that you go about doing your work, which would be the one?
I'd probably choose the heart. That was the one that I chose to first, and I feel that kind of, underpins everything.
Okay, perfect. And you're now off the hook. But if we were having a coaching conversation, then we could take that left, right, and center into all sorts of directions. But it's given us some things to hang information on very, very quickly. Lovely. Let's pick on one person and we'll find somebody else. Tim, you're giving me visual footnotes in the chat bar, so I don't need to talk to you, but it's beautiful what you've typed. But you don't need to unpack it. So you've dodged a bullet by helping me out. Let's go with Karen. Karen Sylvester. Hello, Karen. Are you able to talk to us, Karen?
I am able to talk, Steve, yes.
Oh, fantastic. Tell us about screwdrivers, Karen, and sunflowers.
Well, similarly, I suppose a bit like the key, but I do careers education in departments. So I suppose the screwdrivers are about helping students understand the tools that they need in order to develop their employability and their careers. And I chose a sunflower because I guess one of the things for me I always find, whether it's coaching or teaching, is the element of trust. This is a bit kind of around the houses, but it's the element of trust that I feel students need to have in me. So my approach to teaching and coaching is to kind of be quite bright and hopefully sort of in a way that helps them feel like, this is something that isn't threatening, that is kind of approachable, I guess, trying to be a bit sunny about it all.
Perfect. And look, I just ask you a coachy question then on the back of that, just to illustrate. What is it that gets in the way then of that relationship? If you're trying to do the sunflower piece that that helps brighten it, what is it that gets in the way there?
Well, I mean, in a class of students, obviously they're bringing so much with them that maybe that isn't always what they need. I guess if they've had a particularly bad morning or having a bad time of it, maybe they don't always necessarily want somebody who's like, yeah, this is all great. So yeah, I think it is it can sometimes be a little bit too much. I'll honestly say that.
Perfect.
But,
so we recognise there's a shadow as well as the sunshine in the sun
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And again, we continue the metaphor together. Perfect. That's lovely. Thank you for sharing. I could go through all of you and ask, but I'm really not going to. But the point is there that if we can create metaphor quickly, we can create comparison quickly. Whether you've got 10 to 100 people in a room or one-to-one conversations, you can still use that same sort of approach. And so this is something that Curie and I both do quite a lot in different forms. So there's a just flagging up another book this is a book that Kay Guccione and I wrote a couple of years ago. Not advertising that book at all, but the illustration on the front is for me and for Kay and for Curie as well. This idea of what we're trying to do is to help people get unstuck in what they do. And sometimes the visual metaphor is quite a quick conduit to that. I had a client talk about that they were in a kind of mind jail. And they drew a little picture, and we started talking about it, and we kept coming back to that again and again and again about what would get you out of that, and what are the bars, and who was the jailer, and we used that conversation a lot over the course of a series of conversations. But of course, if you've got somebody who doesn't necessarily lend themselves to that way of putting something down on paper, then you might need to find a different way of doing it. And you could use objects. You could, like Curie's grab bag of stuff. You could use images on a screen. You could use postcards. I've got a collection of about 200 postcards that I throw around rooms sometimes and let people pick. It's really good if you're doing peer-to-peer coaching or action learning SETI type work, to get people to choose some things and have them wander around and select things and say, look, this is my life and these are my values and this is my department's values, and then we draw some lines between those two things. So there's all sorts of ways that you can use that. But ultimately, and I'll show you one more slide and then I'll hand back to Curie. But ultimately, what you've got to think about is what are the best tools that you have that you are comfortable with? How do you want to use them in terms of the interaction of the group or of the dynamic between you and that other person, between the person that you're coaching? And then how are you going to make sure that the objects don't actually get in the way of building the relationship? So we've got to think a little bit about how are we going to nurture the discourse as opposed to just it being about the objects for the sake of it. How are we going to tailor whatever content we do to their goals and their vision and their needs and the objectives of the program that we're working to, if that's the case? And how does that fit in the right environment? Because, as Karen's just said, sometimes they've got a lot of other stuff going on, and you being all chipper and visual with them is perhaps not what they need. So we've got to try and find an overlap of those three things. So let me hand back to Curie. Curie, I know that you wanted to talk through this.
So in the book really, we had to make a decision. And so we positioned it not for a newbie facilitator, because facilitation, you bring a vast array of skills to it, and you build those as you go. So we talk a bit about the basics of facilitation. We have two models, the one that we've just shown you and the one at the back of the book, which is some sort of areas of facilitations, different perspectives that you bring to facilitation. But really we wanted to say, well, what you are a facilitator in whatever ways, a coach, a mentor, a team leader, and what visual tools can you use, what graphical tools. So this is just to say how we divided it. It took us a long time to get to this. We're very proud of it. So we've done a little bit about facilitation, but then it's part 3 and 4 that are the sort of the building blocks, if you like. So we're going to show you some of those, get you to do some. There is no pressure to share it. You do not have to upload it. You can if you want to. So this is just private to you.
Just before we do that, though, Paul's typed in a really interesting question in the chat. It says, have you found when delivering things that you need to offer non-creative options to those who don't want to do it or don't feel comfortable doing it? Which I think is a really good question, and it's something that we talk about, isn't it, Kieran?
Yeah. So we talk within the book, we talk about some of the tensions that comes up. Generally, the biggest tension is I can't draw. So if I say we're going to do some drawing, people are like, oh, but if I say, so for the next example, I could say we're going to draw a timeline, we're going to draw a graph. Maths. You've told me maths, I can't do maths. Whereas actually I say, we're just going to take a long view of your career. We're just going to do a process so that you get you get one image of your career for now. And people go, okay. So sometimes it is the purpose of what you're doing that helps. Other times I will say, if this doesn't work for you, what will? And people will say, well, if I can, I think in spreadsheets, can I lay it out in a spreadsheet? That's fine. It is the thinking that is, and the unlocking that's the issue. It's not the image. So yeah. Do you want to add anything there, Steve?
For me, to answer your question, just to build very slightly on what Curie said, I completely agree with what Curie said, by the way. But to answer your question, Paul, for me, what's really important, and it goes back into that sort of contracting piece, and it doesn't matter whether you be having a one-to-one coaching conversation or working with a group. There's always a little bit of contracting that goes on, or in my professional opinion, there should be, which is just say, look, how are we going to engage with each other, and how are we going to do this, and how do you want me to be, and what do you need here, and how do we trust each other? And that's always part of for me, that's always part of the gig. And so look, there'll be times where I'm going to ask you to do things that feel a bit weird, but let's go with it and have it a go. And for me, I don't get that resistance in quite as much because I never do anything that looks arty. I'll do the hard stuff and I'll let them draw funny pictures if they want to and not if they don't. And then I'll kind of I'll meet them halfway on their page a little bit. But it's not something I come up with very often because we always spend a little bit of time finding some sort of safe space at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
it's about serving space and serving purpose. So, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to say on to the next thing, really. I was just going to move it on. We've rehearsed for hours. Right, so you're going to do a bit of drawing. Curie, go on, lead them through it.
You need a piece of paper. It can be scrappy paper. Probably not a tiny piece, though. So something like A4 is great. And you need a pen. And you're just going to draw a line. So for this one, I call this the landscape of life. But we're just going to do it in brief. Please do have a think about, how might this work for you? So you're going to draw a horizontal line. If I could have the next slide, please. And the horizontal line denotes sort of okay, not okay in a bad way, not in a glum way like the visual is, but it's just like doing fine, steady. And then you've got very smiley, so above the line, the more above the line, the more positive, further below the line, the more negative, just to give you the feel of it. So next slide, please. So now just pick a portion of time that you're comfortable picking. It could be the last week, it could be the last month, and you're just going to pop on the horizontal line some dots, crosses, can be any shape you like. You're keeping this private to you, of what was going on at the time. So I tend to talk about careers and jobs, but I've also put down other things that were happening. So you'll see here, this one I've made up. So I've just said, okay, well, I'll take a 10-year span. I went for a new job. Don't worry about the crosses at the minute. I went for a new job. I started some study. I moved house. So that was true. So PhD, moved house, moved location, there was some ill health, doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna go quiet now, but I'm gonna watch the chat. If you want to come off mute and ask any questions to clarify, please do. Otherwise, I'll keep a look at the chat. I'm going to start speaking again. So some of the framing safety-wise, especially in a group, I'll say something like, obviously there'll be a context of the piece, so dependent on that, I'll say there may be periods of time that that are difficult for you. I would suggest you don't over focus on that. You either note it or don't note it. So start from a date that you're comfortable to the end date. With a longer session, I will do a longer map. So hopefully you've got something along the horizontal. And now if you think back on your experience as it was at the time, not how you've reframed it now, but as it was at the time, pop in some high and low points. So you'll see I haven't put any notes on this. I've just thought, oh, well, in about just after the new job, it was really up and elated, and then it got better, then it might go down. You can just probably remember that there was a fluctuation of emotion, of lived experience. So your subjective experience at the time. And when we spend time doing this, you realize, or people realize, oh, that job wasn't all great, or this job isn't all bad, or this job isn't all great. There are highs and lows. So once you've done that, you can connect them with a line. So just to give you some practical tips, I will say things like, if you make a mistake, cross it out or grab another piece of paper. You start discerning what, you find the detail people are like, could I have a pencil? Could I have a rubber? Could I draw? And I try and keep people away from the editing process, because otherwise we got locked in. You're just getting a shape of things. So here is a line graph. Now that we could just go, great, that's a line graph. That doesn't serve a purpose. Now, depending what conversation you might have, you might use the following prompts, such as, okay, we've looked at a period of time. What patterns do you notice? And then you wait and see what emerges. Another coaching prompt might be, well, let's have a look at your high points and low points. Thinking back, how do these align for your value with your values? Now that's going to be much easier if we've already talked about values. So you wouldn't use that otherwise, because quite often values are quite involved. So build on conversations you've had before. So how did that work with your strengths? So to give you an example, somebody could say, well, actually, I was really struggling because I was using new tools that I didn't know, and everybody in my team knew them, and I didn't know who to go to. So that was actually, I wasn't upskilled in those. What did you gain from the experience? What did you learn from it? What did that teach you? Language that will work for you, the client group that you've got. And then what tends to happen is I do these sorts of looking back, reflecting things in order to look forward and serve the next purpose. So looking forward then, what do you want more of and what do you want less of? So to give you some examples, people might say, oh, I realized that I tend to go lower when I get isolated, when I move further away. So now I make sure that now I've realized that I need to have touch points with previous colleagues, so that I can just keep chatting to people, keep that friendliness up and do more social things. Okay, so we're going to move to something else now, over to Steve.
So just for me, for one slide, just to then extend what Curie's just talked to you, that idea of a timeline or a journey, if you combine some of the things that we talked about already, for instance, one of the things that I'll do is I will have a stack of cards, a stack of image cards, postcards, and say, show me what the journey was in metaphorical form. So, for instance, with a peer coaching group of PhDs or postdocs, show me the academic journey, and they will say, oh, there's the forest of discovery and the swamp of data and the nightmare of, and they'll create a timeline with images rather than highs and lows, just to illustrate a couple of things in there. So the one on the left is it's a timeline of a PhD with where they've doodled pictures on top of it, but you could equally do it with cards. The one on the right is a much more kind of stitched together journey of a process, and it doesn't even matter what that process is. And to be quite honest with you, I can't remember, but I do remember it was a journey from start through to finish, and they created image around it. So you could have highs and lows and drawing, or you could have images along the way, or you could use pre-selecting graphics that fit as part of your practice. And again, to Ruth's comment in the chat before, but people start to giggle and go, well, that's not what it looks like, and they kind of lighten up sometimes rather than it being a resistance thing. They lighten up because of it. So you can extend that in all sorts of different ways, depending on time and group and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A pack of Uno cards, Vanny, absolutely. A stack of magazines that they can cut images out and just kind of find things and stick it along the way. Dixit cards. Oh, my wife loves her Dixit cards. Absolutely. Yes, she uses that with the kids that she used to teach as well. You're absolutely right. It's a really good idea. So if we just then move that back, and I'll throw back to Curie, we can then extend that in a slightly different way.
So that's a line, but you can use other templatey things like a figure. So hopefully this might be in a new job or a new relationship. So draw me your ideal. What does the ideal X look like? So have a look at the image. I'm going to give you very little time. What is this? This was a composite picture. Who is this the ideal picture of? So I'll give you a little bit more context. This was with a group of people that didn't know each other. There was a high level of tension in the room. They were new to the role. You could feel it, and that was absolutely fine. That's a very normal place for me to walk into.
Okay,
They were there to be, told what to do. So absolutely. So these were researchers, and I said, look, what do you? Sorry, these were PhD students, and we were talking about your ideal supervisor. We actually brought it back to who is the ideal student as well. So got them to think about the relationship, but also expectations. So this one was about expectations. You can see this was a group that was much more about computer science together.
So, but Daniela's saying professor, and Marjorie's saying leader, and Angela's saying manager and research leader, decision maker, says Tim. The idea also, if you've got a group who are a little bit anti-creative in some ways, and we both work with people in groups that are, getting them to label the diagram makes it somehow seem a little bit safer too. But starting with a base template of here is a blank human creation, now do some things on it, gives them some play to doodle around that. But then you can extend that a little bit to to say, well, let's pick somebody else, and and say, well, what would an ideal collaborator look like? The dead cat of curiosity there, inverted on the back of the chameleon that is anything to anybody. So again, just helping create that kind of that metaphor to get the ball rolling, get things unstuck at the beginning. Or the idea of the ideal supervisor, or the ideal colleague, or it doesn't matter what it is, but again, can be done with a group, can be done with an individual, could be done as homework between sessions, and they come to you with something to talk about. So again, going back to getting that intersection between what they will do and what you're happy with and what nurtures the relationship properly is an interesting way of playing it. But again, as it stands, perfect, using animal metaphor to spark leadership conversations. Yeah, so what animals are we? Is an interesting conversation, and they don't have to be able to draw that, or modes of transport. Transport's easier to draw than animals, I always think. But as Curie said before, in and of itself, it's just an object or an artifact. What you've then got to do with it, Curie, is to use those kind of coaching prompts.
And so again, just to give you something that is coaching related, what could you ask? They've created this, and you go, oh, that's fun. You've had some fun. Stick it on a wall. But no, you want to take it further forward. So how, so just flip this. If this was somebody talking about themselves, I'm a new leader and this is what I want to be. But how do you compare to that ideal? And then taking it forward, do you know people with those characteristics? Yes, I really admired so-and-so. I really met so-and-so. They were great. Can you approach them for a conversation? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I could do. What areas have you got that you've mapped that you're a bit concerned about? Are there some skills that you can learn that help you further forward? So it might be, oh, I have to deal with conflict. Great. How are you with that? What do you think about that? What might emerge? What other tools can you bring forward, or can you look at? What training is there that you can use? How can you upskill? So I'm going to go to we're going to move now. One of the other things I do, you'll need a piece of paper, is I tend to do things. A lot of these things are 2D, but you can go 3D as well. So this is actually 2D, but let's pretend it's 3D. Grab a piece of paper.
Just before they do, Curie, there's one thing in between. So
Great.
they'll need it in a moment. No, it's okay. It's just
yes, you're right.
bypass the slide.
My bad.
It's okay. It's not a problem. But I can make a segue of 3 dimensions, which is it's just
seamless.
Seamless, absolutely, like we rehearsed for hours. You don't even need to be able to draw. So giving them, I collected milk bottle tops off flagons of milk for a while to use as kind of tactile kind of currency chips, like poker chips, I guess. Could have just bought some poker chips, but I drank a lot of milk. And what I did with this was on a away day with a group, is I said, right, show me how this group functions with different colors and different patterns. And they said, well, actually, there's that cluster of us that do this, and then there's the red part and there's the green part. So we called that as we are. And then I said, right, if everything was working brilliantly, what should it look like? And we moved them towards the ideal. Now, the reason it's not just to, play with milk bottle tops, but as coaches, or if people are exhibiting coach-like behaviors in their role, you'll kind of know frameworks like GROW. Sometimes people don't know what the goal is, but they might know what the reality is. So if you say, how should this group be operating? They don't quite know what to do with it. But if you say, how are we at the minute? They know what to do with that. Likewise, with a one-to-one conversation, I had someone say, right, draw me what your working place looks like. No idea, Ruth. Don't know. I can't remember. Doesn't matter what the colours signify. I genuinely can't remember. Maybe one of them was. No, I started to go. One of them was full fat, and I thought, no, that's a joke that I can't tell. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what they were. It doesn't matter anymore. It was a long time ago, but they knew, and that was the important thing, that they knew. Similarly with the yes, it probably was, but I don't know what it was. Doesn't matter. Not to me anyway.
Sorry to cut in. This is where, and this is something we haven't said yet, they hold the meaning. So actually, here are the bottle tops. What does it look like? And they go, well, I suppose let's be red, or they choose. And again, that's that autonomy and ownership over what's happening.
In the same way that if I said to you, right, okay, tell me how your current department that you work in is like a guitar, and you would go, oh well, okay, Sam's the strings, and and Joe the boss is the neck of it, and who's the sounding board. You create your own metaphor, and all I've done is force an object onto you. Same with the milk bottle tops. The graphic down the bottom left is I asked a one-to-one, this is a coaching client, to say, show me what your work looks like. Show me what it looks like. And then say, well, show me how you would like it to be. So rather than chaos, it was much more organized and sorted, and gave them time to press pause sometimes and just stop the stuff coming down the systems. And we had long conversations and coaching conversations about that. So rather than it being a model that is GROW, goal, reality, options, will, which you'll all as coaches know, I quite often use graphics in a slightly different way, which is to say, well, let's talk about the reality first, and then we can talk about the fantasy later on if you want to, but let's at least build it on something that they can get a handle on. So again, that's an intuition piece. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not. And I think it's not necessarily about overthinking it, right? Sometimes it's just about trusting your gut to it and thinking, well, what's going to work best here. So that was a little detour through 3 dimensions into just changing the way, the model that you might normally run as your kind of default coaching setting. However, back to 3 dimensions. Curie, there you go. There's my little left turn at the traffic lights for a moment.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I'm going to show you something, but it's easier if you do it. We're not going to do the whole activity, just part 1. So sometimes you say, oh, here's some bottle tops, you choose. Other times I'll use a tool and I'll run them through how to do it. So in the same way, if you grab a piece of paper and you fold it in half, sorry, that's my A4. You fold it in half, you fold it in half again. So if you do this along with me, you'll see what I mean. This is one technique by a guy called Oliver West, and it's called footnotes. And you keep folding till it's just it's just a little bit less than a credit card. This gives you a grid of 16. There are lots, and go to Oliver's work if you would like to look at footnotes. Is his site. There are lots of ways I do this. I just want to tell you a couple. So this gives you a window or grid that's small. And I will use this over and over again for anything that is a big project plan. So if you want to do this along with me, I'm not giving you enough time to, but if you want to start with that, you're very welcome to. So think of your writing project, a PhD, an article, this presentation. What is it? What are the elements that you want? So quite often people will get overwhelmed, including myself. There's so much to do. There's not enough time. How do I? Okay, let's focus on that project. What do you want? And they put one idea, drawing or writing, down on the one grid. They then flip the grid and draw it. So this particular tool does require you being there and showing them, because otherwise people tend to get lost, and it's absolutely fine. It's just to give you an example that sometimes you do need to walk through some of it. So, and each time they flip the grid, they will end up using paper. Keep opening it, flipping it. Don't get distracted. Keeps people really focused. Back on the blank side. Anyway. They keep writing ideas or drawing ideas till you finish the sheet. There would be 16. And just so you know, if it's useful as a facilitator, using this method, they only ever cover one side of the page, which is very helpful. They never double cover. So they now say, oh, I finished with that idea, have another piece of paper. So it's a timed activity. At the end, you can do different things. Let me show you. And Steve, could we have the next slide? So this one was how are you, where are you at with your project at the minute? It probably was a PhD at this time. And you'll see things you recognize. What are the barriers? That would have been it. What are the barriers to doing this? And you'll see some of them have several ideas, but you've got these ideas. I will then, another layer, that can be the starter for a conversation. So more recently, we're going to talk about LinkedIn and doing a post and becoming visible. What are the things that make you go, oh, that stop you? What are the barriers or the gremlins? And then I got them to tear them all up into the little grids, keep some at the place they were sitting at, and then walk around the room and match where it's metaphors, so you're not quite sure if they're matching, but they saw in the room that the same tensions were visible. They were not alone. And that was it. That was the point of that piece. They all had barriers. So you can tear these up, or for the example I've given, you can tear these up into sections and then group them. So it is a reverse mind mapping, visual mind map. So you will group them into, oh, well, I need to say quite a lot about phenomenography and the context of it because people don't know. I'm then going to build an outcome model. That might be a research paper. And then I'd say, well, you'll see the gaps that you need to fill in now. So put in some other drawings there. Or you will see ideas that just simply don't fit. That is for a different paper. Oh, okay. So you can kind of get your ideas out there. And then one of the things that we haven't said is I'll get people to take a picture of their item. So they've got a copy that they can come back and revisit. Okay, so that's a footnote. So we're going to go to a different thing, which is made images. So this is really good if you don't want people to draw, not if you don't want people, if you think, oh, I just want to get people into something quickly, is collaging. There's also a phrase which people say, which is like, oh, this reminds me of being with my grandkids or being at school. So I will always flip that round and say, and when did you have the most fun learning? And it's often, well, when I was 4. This is why, because you're allowed to learn in lots of different ways, in a different way. So I will take some of those comments and reflect it, make it louder in the room. What do people think? So this is essentially collect some images, 5 minutes, arrange them on a card so that they are pleasing to you, add in lines. But I will ask them to pick images they are drawn to. So a bit like earlier, they'd say, oh, just seen the time. So these are very good for big questions. What is chronic pain? What does doing a PhD mean to you? You can then collate it. So we're now moving to the digital space. The next slide. This is a Padlet. So this is what my PhD journey, this is my vision for my PhD journey. This was an induction for PhD students. We put it on Padlet. Then you can ask them to look at it for patterns. Next slide. You can also go 3D. So sometimes having objects that move around, people like this is going to be building a vision for the next year for our team. Next slide. And the other thing, which is a side effect, is that people take photos, they want to share it with people. You can use it on social media, obviously with permissions, etc. So this was a recent post I did. Next slide.
Okay, so the next one is me, which is... think about, and again, it comes back to this idea. Curie's just talked a little bit about, using a Padlet, but with a client or with a one-to-one coaching conversation. If you're doing things where, you need to do something quite quickly with them, to say, use some words, put some words in the chat, or use some words that describe how you would want to be. And as they're talking, I might take those words and put them into the chat as we're talking. And then maybe homework between now and the next time we see is like, go and take those words and I'll post them in the chat for them as a collation and say, go and whack those into an AI engine and create an image of how you want. And in this case, your collaborative research group to be. So this was with a research leader. I was saying, how do you want your group to be? And they typed in words like international and diverse and collaborative and conversational and et cetera, et cetera. And they created this image. So this was something that they created through their engine. And then we talked about it next time. I said, so what's really important there and how are you going to facilitate that? And we use that as a basis for a coaching conversation. You can do it the other way around as well and say, rather than what you do want, what don't you want? And so again, this is a different image from a different client who said, I don't want these things and I don't want these things. And they went away and they came back with this and we laughed about it for 5 minutes. And then we said, right, okay, how do you, if there's your pre-mortem, how do we make sure that we avoid those things? And we talked about putting behaviors in place that would stop it. A lot of the work that I do is around people's confidence. And Curie used the word gremlin a little while ago. Their gremlin that sits on their shoulder and talks to them and says they can't do it and they can't do things. And so sometimes I say, well, what does your gremlin look like? What does it sound like? How does it feel? What color is it? What flavor is it? What does it look like? Describe it to me. And I used to just keep that in headspace. But what I've realized now is that they can whack that into an engine and it comes up with their actual gremlin and we give it a name and we say, this is called Clive and shut up, Clive, and we talk about it like it's a real entity and they've given it physical space and they'll stick it by their desk or they'll screw it up and they'll throw it in the bin or regardless, depending on what is required. So again, just because you're not even in the same room as that person, it doesn't mean that a lot of the things that Curie's talked about can't be used. You just have to be slightly quirky in the way that you do it. So this is about using your space, not just about your technological space, but also your physical space. So just as we sort of move towards the end, we're going to just show you a couple more pictures and then we'll wrap up. We've got maybe 2 or 3 more minutes to go. Curie, you wanted to talk about this one for a moment too, didn't you?
So I don't know what spaces you use, but have you thought about the space, the physical walls, and what you could do with it? Obviously, it depends on time. One thing that we haven't said is using materials means that there is setup time and take down time. So you do need to build that in. So like you might have a room, a typical seminar room. Can you stick things on the floor? Can you stick them on the wall? I've done something at the beach, which was a coaching session at the end of a conference. So it was very much about what are the things that it was actually a walk along the beach, but we used it and we used the materials on the beach. We talked about waves, lines, collecting things. I did a collage for this first session and I said, I need a big movable space. I then walked into this space and you know what it's like with booking things. And I said, it's okay, I can make it work. And it did, and it worked fine. It was also a lot of fun because I did at the end, I said, right, I want you, let me know your feedback, but what you're going to do is make a plane. And so they wrote their feedback, made a plane and hurled it from the back to the front. And there was a lot of giggling, a lot of laughter, a lot of conversation. You've got much more of an arty space at the bottom right. So this was at a conference where we could roll out paper and people were, it's actually changing people's physical position. So they were on the floor or they were able to be on the floor and connect and you can see tearing paper, etc. So over to Steve.
So just to bring it home then, the intersectional space between working with individuals and working with groups, I'll sometimes use this as a kind of way of bridging that gap. So this was a kind of closed down session of a series of this one was peer-to-peer coaching, but it could equally have been action learnings. To say, what have you learned over the last X number of weeks with each other? What are your golden rules for success? And I got them to go off and draw pictures in pairs. And then we stuck them to the wall, but we tried to create a narrative. So I provided the arrows and I said, so what's the first one? And somebody stuck it up and I said, so what does that connect with? And somebody said, well, that connects with this thing that we've talked about. And then you stick up an arrow between them. And that connects with something that we've talked about and you stick up an arrow between them. So as a collective, you create a journey, you create a series of connected points. And at the end, you take a photo and it gives them something that they can both have conversations about and remember as well. So my kids quite often spend the evenings cutting out arrows while they're sitting in front of the television. We know how to live in Yorkshire, but just as a way of creating that kind of composite that has a story that flows. So kind of distillations of learning. And then on the back of all of that, to put absolutely everything together, final slide from me, and Curie's got one, to kind of mix that up a little bit. So this was a conversation with it was an away day within an apartment, saying, look, here's some Lego. So the first thing we gave them was Lego. Build your role. And I gave them sort of 10 minutes to build their role. And of course, nobody's Lego actually looked like what their role was, but it was a metaphor, and we talked about it, and they had to kind of guess what they represented with it. And then we stuck them on a piece of paper and said, right, show me where the strong connections and the weak connections are, and where you need to have better conversations and where there are no conversations. So we used 2 or 3 different ways of doing it to facilitate that kind of conversation, and to get that group that was really quite dysfunctional at the time into something that was a little bit more cohesive. And it happened quite quickly. So again, point is, you can be as risky or creative as you feel that they would allow you to be, and as you would be prepared to be as well. But the point in all of this is there's very little in what Curie and I have shown you where we are holding the pen. 90% of it, they are holding the pen, or they are holding the kind of kit. So with that in mind, Curie, we'll hand over to you for final slide.
So before I go to final slide, Vanny's asked a really good question. So this we haven't done. I have written a chapter about practical ethics of using drawing or using these graphical facilitations. It's not in this book, it's in a different book. There are some tensions that will come up. So Vanny's question is, how do you manage the people who are there but think such activities are a waste of time? I will probably have a quieter conversation. And it now doesn't happen that much, probably because it's about purpose, and it's about why we're here together and what is the gain from this. There is always something that people can do, like labeling. Like I don't draw. What do you see? This is where I'm trying to get to. What would help you with that? Oh yeah, well, it's easier if I do it this way. There's also some practical things. I had one class, and sometimes these will just appear where there was a moment because somebody had never seen Lego before. So where I'd assumed that people knew how to do this, they hadn't. And that's quite easy to kind of say, well, have a play at the beginning. So now I will do that. I'll have the materials out. And so people are playing. And so people that are not sure or just moving things around will be like, we'll watch each other. We'll always, as adults, we will still watch each other. What do you do? What do you do? What are you doing? So it's happy to have a longer conversation, happy to share the article as well. But it's really good. And that's probably, as facilitators, it's important that we look after where we're at as well. Just doing something for the sake of saying I'm doing a graphical facilitation isn't the point. It's to say what will work with this group.
I would completely endorse that. And I know that I'm really quite cynical, despite the fact I'm, many of you will have seen me as being buzzy and creative. I'm actually quite cynical. And if I go to a session or a training course or a workshop and the person says, we're just going to do an icebreaker at the beginning, it's just a little bit of fun, my brain has gone at that point and you lose me for 45 minutes. If they say we're going to do something that is about the thing that we're coming to do, and everything is lensed and focused around purpose, as Curie says, you'll keep me, even though I'm actually quite cynical about the way that these things work. So it's also about the way that we frame it as well. What is the value that we think this activity has, and because they will pick that up, they pick that mirroring up from us.
I'm sorry, I've thought of a really good example, so I'm just going to give it to you. I was with GPs in training, and I'd been brought in by somebody. I had a long session, 2 hours, and it was about we want them to use art, actual art. And I was like, okay. And so we talked about the tensions up front. What are the things that are going to be a bit tricky for you? So one was a collaging thing. The other one was some GP directors in a museum. And it was about using the objects in the museum. What are some of the tensions? So we get them out and then link it to purpose. So these are the gremlins in the actual room about the actual facilitation. So last bit, another template. I use this a lot. And that's just use a hand. This is, if you like, a very easy project management thing. So you're just going to put your hand on a piece of paper and draw around it. It doesn't have to be in the direction that I've put it. It's just using your hand as a template. You can use this in different ways. each finger becomes an entity. So if I locate it with graphical facilitation, how could you use graphical facilitation in your own practice? A word that we haven't used, so we're now sort of winding down, is reflection. Having time to reflect is good for everybody. We talk about it in a bit more detail with people with neurodiversity, but it's actually very good anyway. So giving people time to think. So I've put some labels on here. From some of these ideas, we've done some lines, we've done some shapes, we've done the thinking grid, we've done collage, we've done bottle tops, we've done visual cards. What do you think you could use? So each finger. How do you think you could use it? When might be good? Who is this for? And why are you doing it? The other thing about this, you can start with any finger. So if you think, oh, well, I know I've got this coming up in the diary, then we start with the who or the when. To start wherever you makes logical sense. And you can obviously use this tool, not just for this sort of project management timelining, but anything where you've got concepts in fives. You can draw each one out. I'm going to give you 30 seconds more of just thinking, and then I will show you a real life example. Okay, so bringing it into land. If you would like to share these, feel free to. There is no pressure to do so. So the example, and I appreciate you can't see all the detail, is this is a workshop I ran. And there's just my graphic of who it was for and what were the areas that I wanted to do. So you can see that although this is graphical facilitation, I've used my hand, it's mostly text, but it is ordering text in a different way and using the space differently on a page so that I can quickly see.
I do exactly the same thing with clients. And what I do is I say, let's look at the four areas of your professional life. And I use the four fingers. So it could be their research, their teaching, their citizenship, their impact, if they're researchers, or it could be, it doesn't matter. 4 professional areas or goals or projects that they've got. And we work on those 4 things. And I use the 4 finger labels exactly as you can see on the screen. And the thumb is, how are they looking after themselves? Because if your thumb doesn't work, your fingers ain't great either. And so that's like it then brings it back to how they are looking after themselves and what support they are getting from people, as well as all these jobs that they've got to do. And then that's a really nice, it's not just a piece of paper, it becomes something that's kind of physically attached to them all of the time, and they think about it in a slightly different way. So again, you can even extend that into something that's more than just graphical. It's actually embodied. But that's a topic for a totally different day, the idea of embodiment.
So we thank you so much for joining with us. I hope that gives you a sort of practical things that aren't too frightening to start with and make you excited about what is possible. So there's more ideas in the book, and we're here. We're going to stop the recording in a minute once we've said goodbyes, but we're still here to have a chat if you want to delve a bit deeper. So we might crash the internet. We're not going to. If you could come off, if you could unmute yourself so that we can say bye, and thank you for all the hearts. So 3, 2, 1. See you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you all.
That's a huge thank you to both of you. That was, I can see the engagement in the chat, and I hope that everyone had fun playing, because my notebook is full of drawings. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Curie. Really enjoyed the session. Thank you for your time.